Let's Talk ADHD with Alex High, and today, Farah Jamil. Thank you for joining us, Farah. We met a couple years ago now.
Really? Has it been? I thought it
At
was,
least
oh wow.
about a year, maybe two, and we were connected through a mutual connection. And it's been so great to get to know you, Farah, and I'm so thankful you're here.
You as well, Alex. I'm just it's such a pleasure to be here and to chat with you. I always love having the opportunity to talk with you. So this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Farah, what is your ADHD story?
Oh, what is my story? Where to begin? Okay, let's just start at the beginning. For me, had a really happy childhood. I was always very talkative, very outgoing, very bubbly is how I was described. I actually enjoyed school. And most of the time I enjoyed school. I played a lot of sports growing up. It was funny because my brothers called me the jock of the family because if there was like a team or a sport to try, that was usually me. And it wasn't until I think maybe not until I was an adult did I start feeling some things that we now know to be ADHD.
Mm.
There was never anything discussed about ADHD when I was a child. And then suddenly I started noticing some things. Typically, when it came to school, I would like wait until the last minute to do some assignments because that's when I could really focus.
Mm.
And also because maybe I was doing some other things. And so doing certain things at the last minute didn't seem out of place. And it was funny because I would have some friends say, "How in the world did you study for that exam or do that assignment at the last minute and get a better grade than we did?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, isn't this how your brain works? Like, this is just how my brain works." It was just never. I
Mm.
just didn't give it a second thought. I was like, "Well, this is when I was able to do it, so that's when I did it," and it worked for quite a while until suddenly it didn't.
Mm.
It wasn't working as well anymore. And that's when I was starting to seek answers. It's like, why is it that now I'm struggling with things that were so much easier for me? Why am I always running late? It doesn't matter what time I go to bed, I still seem to be late, what good intentions I have. Why am I always late? And it started getting to be problematic. And it was impacting me, on a regular basis. So I actually went to a psychologist. Not something I ever thought I would do, but I
Mm.
did. I went to a psychologist and I said, I think I have time management issues. So maybe we can work through that. And he said, sure. And we tried out some things, but nothing seemed to work. So then, just by chance, I was watching a program and it was by a journalist, Lisa Ling.
Mm.
And she was interviewing a physician scientist about ADHD. And as he was describing some of the symptoms, so, procrastination, time blindness, difficulty getting started on tasks, hyper focusing on the wrong things at the wrong time, all these things. And so Lisa says, "Wow, that sounds like me." And I'm saying to the screen, "That sounds like me too." And so he said, "Well, let's assess you." So he did like a quick assessment and determined that, yeah, she likely had ADHD. So I went to my psychologist and I said, I think I have ADHD. And he's like, "No, you don't." So what do you mean? He said, "Mm-mm. You're an Ivy League graduate. You have a full time job. You have loving family and friends, and you're very charming." I said, "What do any of those things have to do with whether I have ADHD or not?" So I don't know what came over me, but I asked him, let's take down the DSM-5 manual and go through it together. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. I said, let's go through it together. And he was so reluctant, but he's like, "Okay, fine, let's do it. It's your time." He took it down. We went through it. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I think you have ADHD." I said, "Yes, I know." And he said, "I'm sorry, I'm not trained in ADHD. I can't help you." And I said, "That's okay. I appreciate you at least telling me that and not trying to fake it. Because,
Hmm.
we need to make sure that we're getting the support that we need." So then I spoke to my family doctor to let her know. And she said, "Okay, let me set you up for an appointment with a psychiatrist." And I hate to admit this, but at first I was so reluctant. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to see a psychiatrist, because that just sounded so heavy,
Hmm.
you know? But then I thought to myself, I'm always telling people the importance of taking care of themselves, that self care and that self awareness is so important. And to not let, people's perspectives or thoughts stop you from being your best." And I admitted that wanting or like the possibility of having to see a psychiatrist, there was that stigma, especially as a woman of color and a visible religious minority. But I'm like, you know what? If I'm here to break down barriers, I have to talk the talk and walk the walk. So I said, okay, yes, fine, let's go ahead. Finally got a chance to see the psychiatrist, told him my story. This was our first time meeting. So he asked me questions. I made sure to answer the questions. And by this time, I had been thoroughly assessed for ADHD. So I had the diagnosis. After I told him my story, he said to me, Farah, I think you just have too high expectations in life. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I really believe in ADHD unless someone is thoroughly assessed and tested. And I said, yes, I have been thoroughly assessed and tested. But basically, what he was telling me was that, I think you just expect too much out of life. And that really broke my heart because here I am. I was so reluctant to even see a psychiatrist. And I finally say, I should. And now this is the second person to say to me, oh, no, you don't have it. And, two people who are clinicians. And at first I was like, what do I do now? Because obviously he just didn't think that I had anything to worry about. He's like, no, you just have too high expectation life. So you just need to, bring it down and just not be so ambitious, I guess. Luckily, I had already trained as an executive coach. So I had worked, in various leadership positions for several years and had gotten exposed to executive coaching, loved it, trained as an executive coach myself, and saw the power of coaching. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, I don't see any ADHD people who look like me
Mm.
talking about ADHD. And I found an ADHD coach training program. So I knew the power of coaching. Maybe I need to train as a coach myself because I was just so tired of people just either not believing me or minimizing what I was going through. They would say, "You're just not trying hard enough. You're just making excuses. You're fine. You just don't want to, do certain things and you're just trying to come up with a reason why, you know, you shouldn't do something." It was really heartbreaking. And so it just by chance a couple of days later my ADHD life coach training was starting.
Mm.
This year-long program. So I had this all in the back of my head. And if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have allowed maybe some of those comments to really bring me down, and who knows what would have happened.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a pretty resilient person. I'm a pretty optimistic person, but when you have people constantly telling you that what you're telling them is just not true or they just don't believe you, it can get to you.
Mhm.
But I was very fortunate that I started this training program at the IX Center, the International ADHD Coach Training Center. And that opened my eyes
Mm.
about ADHD because we started off by learning about the ADHD brain and the facts about ADHD, not just people's opinions.
Mm.
So having those facts like the neurochemistry, the fact that people with ADHD typically have not as much of two neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine, which is why it's harder for us to have focus and attention. This helped to explain some of the things that I've been struggling with, the procrastination, the task initiation, the executive functions, the working memory, all these things. So we started learning about that first, and it just changed my world. I was like, oh, this makes sense. And so as I was training, I realized that, I'm probably not seeing anyone who looks like me talking about ADHD because there are so many misconceptions, because there's not a clear understanding of what ADHD is and what it isn't. So that's what prompted me to be the founder of Muslim ADHDers.
Mm.
And at first, I was very reluctant to do that because thought to myself, oh, if I put this out there, all the trolls are going to come out. I mean, you got two words in there, Muslim and ADHD, and people are going to be like, whoa, what the heck is this? And I was thinking, can I do this like in an anonymous way? Like, do I have to put my face out there? Because I really don't want to. I hated being on camera. I still do. I hate being on camera, and then what are people going to think? Right? Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to disclose so publicly that I have ADHD. But again, I realized that I can't be the only person who looks like me that is struggling with ADHD. And I saw this as an opportunity to bring down barriers and to reduce the stigmas because I didn't want others to suffer needlessly the way I had been suffering.
Mm.
So it was hard, but I put it on Instagram. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to put this on Instagram. And I created Muslim ADHDers, and I then even put on a virtual summit. I said, yeah, let's see. Let's get some experts together. I was very blessed to have various people along my ADHD journey
Mm.
who helped me better understand it. And I was able to put together a virtual summit, and I had, I think, 14 speakers from around the world and some, excellent names in the ADHD community and from various backgrounds too. And the tagline was, or not the tagline, but the theme was, talking about the intersectionality between ADHD, productivity, health and wellness, and faith.
Mm.
Because those were the intersectionalities that were important to me. So I thought, let's talk about it. So I had Muslims and non-Muslims who were speakers talking about ADHD. Those with lived experiences, those with clinical experiences, those with various perspectives on ADHD. And I had over 1,500 people from around the world register for that summit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it was amazing because I was like, and so many non-Muslims reached out to me and said, oh my goodness, thank you so much for doing this, because either they've had patients who were like me and didn't know where to turn to, or they had friends, who were looking for someone to have this kind of platform. And they were so eager to really be part of it. And they're like, you're making history. We've never seen anything like this before. And I wasn't intending to make history, but it's amazing what you can do when you actually do step outside of your comfort zone a bit, or for me,
Mm.
a lot, and let others know about what it is that you've perhaps struggled with, and maybe there's others who have been struggling as well. So that has led to, or that's been like a big part of my journey, is just better understanding myself
Mm.
and then helping others to know they're not alone.
Mm. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is just stepping outside your comfort zone and seeing what happens. So if you had advice for someone who is like, I have an idea I want to do, I'm worried about my ADHD, I'm worried about stepping outside my comfort zone, what advice would you give them?
Mm. I think it's important to have champions.
Mm,
Who are those who can help support you? So, and this is what's also important about ADHD is finding the right structures and supports for your brain,
mm,
for our fabulous brains. And that's what I had to do. So when I was looking to put this out there, I knew I couldn't do it alone, even though I like doing things on my own. That's probably part of my perfectionism.
mm,
So part of my perfectionism is like, oh, I need to be the one to do everything. And if I don't do it perfectly, then I shouldn't do it. That all or none mentality
mhm,
that many of us ADHDers could probably relate to, right? So I found people, I reached out to them, and I told them my idea and asked if they could help. And 99% of the time, they said yes. 99% of the time. And even if it was like less than that, it doesn't matter as long as you're like finding people and finding what you need to help you. So that's my advice is find those who will support you, who do believe you, and who are there to really either you know, help you with thinking through your ideas, right?
mhm,
Recognizing that there's no such thing as perfection, but really just being able to talk through whatever it is that you need to talk through and that you have that safe space to do that with them, right?
mhm,
But also I would say what has really helped me a lot is having that growth mindset.
mm,
Because, for some of us who have RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, if you're the type of person where you are reluctant to try something because you're afraid of the rejection or you're afraid that if something doesn't go perfectly then it's just going to really bring you down and however that looks like for you. Having that growth mindset has helped me so much, and that's based on the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, where she wrote a book called Mindset. And that also changed my life. So going like having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So before, I think when I was so reluctant to even be the face or like, have the name behind Muslim ADHDers, my fixed mindset was all the trolls are going to come out. I shouldn't even bother trying because it's probably not going to work. So I was afraid of failure.
mm,
But then when I had the growth mindset of, hey, let me try this and let's see what I learn. Even if it doesn't go perfectly well, no matter what I try, I'm always going to learn something, which is going to help me make it better. So, yes, things may go disastrously wrong, but you know what? I'm always going to learn something.
mm,
So, having that growth mindset has been fundamental in helping me move forward, even if it's not perfect, even if it's maybe not at the speed that I want, because I want everything done now. And I have all these great ideas, but I don't allow the fear now to dictate.
mm,
I now, for myself, I use a curiosity lens versus a judgment lens. And I say this to all of my clients. If we were to look at this from a curiosity lens, like when you have something that you're afraid of, okay, let's talk about it. What could happen? These are the things that could happen, sure. But let's also look at it from what we can learn from each of those
mm,
scenarios, because there's always that opportunity to learn. So, champions and growth mindset
mm.
are my two pieces of big advice.
All right. Yeah. I almost want to answer this next question for you because I think I know the answer, but would those two things be what you would say are your kind of your keys to success?
Well, first of all, what's the definition of success? Because I can
Very good
tell
point.
you, because I can tell you, wow, I still struggle with that. Even with my growth mindset, I
Mm,
still struggle with, oh, like, man, that fear of failure and fear of success.
mm,
And that for some people may find they may think that sounds ridiculous. It's like, how can you have a fear of failure and a fear of success? And I would say it's because for some people, it's not just about the fear of failure and like, looking ridiculous or, being seen differently or something goes disastrously wrong and then, your confidence goes down. There's not only that fear of failure that I have, but there's also that fear of success. What if I actually do something right, but then I'm not able to sustain it?
Mm,
What if something I'm seen as being very capable in one area, but then I let someone else down in another area, right?
mm,
So for me, I think whenever I feel like I've done something well, there's still this thing where I'm like, okay, great, this went well, but now what? What do I do with this now? Do I just put it here and move on to something else? But I think what helps me is, what is my why? What is my why? So whether I think it's a success or not, or someone else thinks it's a success or not, is not really the point. I think for me, the point is, even if I have to struggle through something, if I know my why, that may help me get through it,
mm.
even if I fall flat on my face, or it becomes like the next best thing. Who knows? So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I would be curious to think what you thought I was going to say.
I don't really know what I was expecting. It's one of those questions I like asking, just like, what would you define? Because success can mean different things to different people. And so trying to figure out what the key to your success is, you first have to define success in your way so you know what you want to achieve. And you also have to accept that you've done some successful things in order to get to the answer of, oh, this is what got me where I am today. And so I've got an improvisational background, so I try not to pre-plan anything. Well, not anything, but there are some things you kind of have to pre-plan, but for the most part, I try and just kind of wing it. So I don't know what I was expecting. I thought you might kind of just piggyback off the previous question of the growth mindset and stepping outside your comfort zone. I don't know. I don't remember what I was expecting when I asked the
And
question.
that's okay. But I'll tell you this, one sign of success for me, honestly, and I'm saying this honestly, is that we're here together,
Mm,
because we probably wouldn't have met if I hadn't put myself out there.
mm,
If I hadn't, put myself out there, then our mutual friend wouldn't have known to put us together,
mm,
because they wouldn't have known that I had ADHD. They would have never heard of Muslim ADHDers. They wouldn't have known that I love the opportunity to connect with others, so that in the ADHD space and beyond the ADHD space, in the neurodivergent space, you and I are both working to bring awareness, to, have these conversations so that anyone and everyone can perhaps have a better understanding of what it's like to be neurodivergent, and how when you've met one person with ADHD, then you've met one person with ADHD, because we're all different,
mm,
right? So for me, this is a great example of what I would define as success. The fact that you and I are here together.
oh, thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, so we're running short on time. I've got one more question for you. So, a question I like asking my guests is, what's one unusual thing you do because of ADHD?
Oh my goodness, that is such a great question. What is an unusual thing that I do because of my ADHD? Huh. That is a really good question. Because of course I would ask, what would you define as unusual? Ha ha ha. Because something that I think is not unusual, someone else might think is unusual, and vice versa. All right, let me think about this for a second. What do I think of, or what do I do that's unusual? Hmm. You've really stumped me here, Alex, but I'm
Mm,
gonna really try my best here. You know, I don't know if this would be considered unusual, but I think for me, what felt unusual is that, you know, if I'm having to do a certain task that's very, I would say detail oriented, because I can do detail oriented things. I just don't enjoy it as much, right? But I can do the detail oriented things. And it could be that certain things I find to be such a struggle that for others are not a struggle. So I think this may be something that many ADHDers can relate to. So for example, I'm much better now at getting to places on time. I'm much better at that. And for some people, they find that so easy. It's like, well, all you have to do is plan out your time so that you get to the place on time. I find that more difficult to do versus, being here with you or being on a large stage and speaking. You
Mm,
give me a microphone, I can talk about almost anything and not be too nervous about it. And for others, they find that so unusual. They're like, how is it that something that they see as being so easy is probably a bit more challenging for someone like me versus something that seems so challenging, such as speaking to large audiences, can be seen so challenging for them. So maybe that is a definition of unusual,
mm,
perhaps. And again, like growing up, I've always found it really easy to talk to people. I enjoy it. Maybe that's why I
mm,
find it easy, because I enjoy it. Whether Whereas with something like, being super detail oriented, I can do it, but I don't really enjoy it,
mm,
right? So if I use that as a definition, I would say that was one of the things that I found to be so interesting about ADHD. And this is something that I always say to my clients, whether you want to use the term ADHD or not, that's up to you. But think about, what are your strengths? What are
mm.
you really good at without comparing yourself to someone else? Because we all have different strengths and challenges. And so when I started thinking about my strengths, some people might find that unusual because they're like, how come you can do these things, these extraordinary things, and you can't do these ordinary things? And that's not what it's about. It's about, with our brains, what engages us,
Mm,
what stimulates us. And that's what I think my ADHD helps me with, is, or is what's unusual, is what are the things that I can do that I find so easy versus perhaps a neurotypical who would look at that and be like, how the heck do you do that?
mm.
And then I look at them saying, well, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do some of those ordinary things, or what is deemed ordinary.
Sort of that, I don't want to say paradox, but like it's the idea of like what I like the terminology you use, the extraordinary versus the ordinary. We can, those of us with ADHD can do extraordinary things. It's the ordinary things where we struggle. Is that what I'm getting? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. And the thing is, like, what others think of as ordinary for us can be such a struggle.
Mm,
And we find it extraordinary when we can actually do it. So the fact that now, most of the time, I'm better with getting to places on time, I find that now extraordinary for myself because I'm like, yay! Because I know with my ADHD, that's one of my challenges,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So I think perception is like a really key thing. And yeah, like I think that's, and I had another thought, and typical ADHD fashion, it has now left my brain, but it might come back. But yeah, like I think it's that perception and just having that compassion for ourselves. And
Mm,
again, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, I think when we have that self-compassion, that can lead to us doing, you know, unusual slash extraordinary things.
that's awesome. I like that's a great mindset. And you were talking earlier about growth mindset and just having the mindset of when you embrace your strengths, you can do great things.
Yeah. And then not letting the challenges, not beating yourself up for your challenges,
Mm,
right? Finding the right structure and support for yourself. And one of the things I talk about, and I know that I'm just looking at the time here, that, I say that Nike has that saying, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's a very clear and concise saying. But I think for many of us ADHDers, it doesn't work for us very well. It's like, well, why don't you just do this? It's like, yeah, wow, that's such great advice. Why didn't I think of that? That's not the problem. It's not that we don't want to do it. And then I heard a saying from a Muslim scholar, Sheikh bin Baya, and Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya. And he said, make the sincere intention and do the work. So
Mm,
I'm like, okay, that's a little bit better because it's like, make the intention, make the goal as to what you want to do, and then do the work. Okay, that's better. But there's still a step missing
mm,
for an ADHDer. So I created the formula for ADHD success. Make the sincere intention or make that goal, plus find the right structure and support for your brain so that you can do the work,
mm.
so that you can just do it. You got to have those elements. You got to find what you need, whether it's those champions, whether it's like, certain ways of doing things, the way you set up your desk, making sure you're not late by having, things in place so that you are able to get to that place on time, however that looks for each person. Those are the elements that are important. So even when we have our challenges, don't just be resigned to it. Find what works for you so that you can do it.
Speaking of the idea of structure and support, let's say there's somebody out there watching this who's like, that's the structure and support I need. Farah is the structure and support I need. Where can they reach you? Where can they find you? How can they get in?
Sure. On Instagram, they can find me under Muslim ADHDers, and it's inclusive. Like, you don't have to be Muslim. So there's Muslim ADHDers. I also have interfaith ADHDers. And I also have my website, farahjamil.com. So FARAHJAMIL.com, which was also another weird thing. I never thought in a million years that I would have a website where it has my name. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. And yeah, reach out. I would love to connect with people. And I'm also on LinkedIn. There's
Okay.
a lot of Farah Jamils there, so I don't know if they'll find me. Otherwise, Instagram and my website, they can get in touch with me that way.
Awesome. And then are you doing any summits upcoming or?
Oh, I've always got things in the pipeline.
Okay, okay.
I do have some things, so I'll make sure if they follow me on Instagram, I'll be sure to put that on there. I'll be doing, I hope, in the fall, another Muslim ADHDer summit.
Awesome.
And again, that's inclusive. Anyone and everyone is welcome to join. And during the summit, it's free. So I'll make sure to advertise that once that's ready to go, but that'll be in the fall. Otherwise, yeah, I'll always have some things noted in my Instagram, and hopefully people will find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching, those of you who are watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.